So I'm here with a woman that has a cause for Cuba. We're out in front of the White House. Do you want to say what it says?
Backwards, but it says, if my family in Cuba can't eat, why should I?
It's actually right, but it looks backwards to us, but it'll be right on the video.
Okay, cool.
So tell them why you're here and why you're so impassioned to be out here doing this.
Well, it's pretty much what my sign says. It's very easy for me to feel what's going on in Cuba because I grew up with cousins there my age, and they would talk to me on the phone about once a month in an expensive phone call and just cry most of the time, wanting to come here and visit and knowing they never could. And that rule is absolutely the most, blaringly oppressive and just like unnecessary, just bizarrely egotistical and abusive law. Like, you can never leave. I cannot believe that is still the law in Cuba, and that everybody is okay with that,
It's like 90 miles away from America, right?
Yeah, and everybody's ignoring that this is an old, very oppressive regime, and a lot of, like, I'm on the left. Like, I'm one of the few Cubans who can be, and I understand my family, especially my family, being too scarred by, the right and what they did at Bay of Pigs. My family members were specifically in that group of only 1,200 people who got stranded there and all went to jail and were tortured. I just learned there was a movie made this year called Los Plantados that is about the forgotten 24 that Kennedy forgot to excuse and buy out from Cuba, the political prisoners he made. He forgot 24 of them, including the very first one he sent as a spy, which is my great uncle. And he's in the movie. They call him Abuelo because he was the oldest one. And he had his feet turned like almost completely backward my whole life because they broke his ankles and to make him, because he didn't want to do the tasks that they made the common criminals do. So they all rebelled together. They were all tortured very viciously together. I grew up with those stories, and I'm feeling it more than ever now. And I can understand why, even though, the right is, I think, in my opinion, changed a lot since Kennedy. Is like, I don't know what Kennedy really has to do with, like, let's say, Trump or Biden, sorry, on the left, as far as people, they're just like modern politicians. Maybe they're right. Maybe they all are the same and they're all in cahoots somehow still, but I've moved on. I'm on the left, but it's really, really sad seeing that nobody on my side of the left wants to say a peep about Cuba.
It is shocking.
Because it's not a right or left issue.
Right.
It's a
It's
human rights.
Human rights.
You're supposed to be all about human rights,
Right.
and you're supposed to be all about Black Lives Matter and, obviously, like, anti-slavery and anti-racism and everything that,
Do you have a theory of why you think they're being quiet, or you just don't know?
I think that it's just like slowly, for whatever reason, Che Guevara, the image, and Fidel Castro have seeped into like the punk and even just like, socialist, Marxist, like, leftist just realm, and people see it around. They're like, oh, I think that's supposed to be cool, and they just don't look into it. And they don't know that Fidel was a private school kid who's super rich, like, who literally is super sexist, super racist, super everything they hate. And he only got rid of the white people in the government first so that he can hold on to the black and brown people for 60 years like he did.
My theory is the reason they're quiet about Cuba is because it's socialist.
Yeah.
And they don't want to make socialism look bad because they have a socialist agenda for America. That's my theory.
I mean, it's a dictatorship. It's not
Right.
really socialist. There's plenty of other countries that socialism is working.
Like which ones?
I mean, I think around Europe, for the most part, although there is problems with, breaking into any kind of wealth there, like, I feel like you do have to have really wealthy families in France and England.
Do you have family in Cuba?
Yeah, actually, my last aunt there died this year.
So you're somewhat safe, because I understand that Cubans have been getting persecuted with family members that have been protesting on video.
I'm really sad to hear that.
Family members have been coming up missing. That's what's being reported.
Wow, that's of course they would do that. Like, and the same thing they're doing with the ones in Cuba, the political prisoners that are rebelling there, or if they even heard they rebel there, what they do is they take away the person and the thing that you love most.
Yeah.
The easiest, quickest way to try and control people is a manipulation technique that they've had and used forever, and it's absolutely horrible. I could go on and on about the absolutely atrocious things.
Do you think this is gonna pass, or do you think actually something's actually gonna finally happen in Cuba?
I don't know. That's why I'm here today. I'm extremely saddened to see that the riots have stopped here.
Well, they weren't riots, but they were protests. You meant to say protests.
Yeah,
right?
the
they
protests.
Weren't really riots,
I mean, they weren't riots at all in Cuba either, that they were calling them riots. Like, they were the most peaceful things protests I've ever seen. Literally people singing a song.
Right, and then they call it riots.
And then not only they call it riots, they start just beating people. There's stabbings. Like, there's a lot of things that go unreported that I hear from my friends.
In Cuba?
I don't want to say anymore. I do have a lot of friends in Cuba, and I'm now afraid to get them in trouble.
Right. See, that's again, they operate with fear because you're worried about your loved ones. So.
I don't know that they've done any protesting, by the way.
Right.
But I just know that they have their medicine and their food completely cut off, and I'm just trying to send them medicine that they need.
Can you get it there?
Yeah, you can. You have to ship things to Miami, unfortunately, first, or Canada. But Miami.
Is there any organizations or websites that of people that, if they were motivated to help out Cuban people for food? Do you know of any?
Yes. There's like a website that's collecting a bunch of. Honestly, they're all for some reason seem to be Catholic organizations, which is a little suspicious. But it's just called helpcuba.com. But there is one there that I really recommend called Emmaus Cuba. EMAUS Cuba. Just look that up, you'll find it. And they work with restaurants that are for the tourists in Cuba to actually pay a bunch of money to buy the food that costs nothing to tourists to be allowed to give it to Cubans. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it works, and it's very fast, and you can feed people within a day through that.
Which they're desperate for because they don't have food.
Yeah, their food costs 25 times about the amount we would pay, and guess what? They're using American dollars right now. To anyone saying that we just need to lift the embargo, Cuba is only accepting American dollars, but of course doesn't pay people in American dollars. So that just shows how absolutely ridiculous and backwards it is, and how much they've been depending on family members like us, for years, as their sole way of survival. Is you have to win. You have to play the lottery every day. If you win the lottery to leave, I don't know what percentage people would, but kind of, I don't know, maybe
small
5-10%, not 1%, but people do win the lottery to leave.
You got a 90% chance of not being able to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if they do leave, then it's on them to feed the rest of their family.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being out here and having a passion for people, and that's why I wanted to give you a voice to the viewers.
Thank you. Yes, if you have any more questions, and I also have a nonprofit that I am collecting to send medicine.
What's the name of that? How do they get to that?
It's Crass Lips Records.
Better spell that.
CRASSLIPS Records. It's a record label.
.org.
But we are mostly just posting a lot of stuff on Instagram, which is just Crass Lips Records. And you can also just go directly to through some of the companies. I mean, it's actually, if you have people in Miami, you can just go directly to some of these companies like Cuba Llama, or it's Cuba Llama, but it's spelled like it was spelled llama, 2 L's. And they're one of the more trusted ones that actually get their stuff to the people without the Cuban government taking half of it, which, I would say the vast majority of the rest of them you can't really trust, unfortunately.
A woman with a cause. There's suffering going on. Help the Cuban people.
Keep fighting. They're gonna keep fighting, and if they don't get support, most of them are gonna die again, like they did in the revolution 62 years ago, that killed the vast majority of my family. And my grandfather was 3 seconds away from being captured too, and he saw what was happening and ran away. So I was very, very close to not being here.
Wow.
And that is just, you know, what's happening to all the families of every color, anybody I know or know of in general in Cuba is happening to all of them.
Cuba is not about politics, it's about human rights. And,
Yes, thank you.
thank you.